David Cole was a poor night shift security guard at Sterling Holdings. Unnoticed. Underpaid, just a name on a clipboard. It was supposed to be a quiet shift. Another night, another empty sky, another silent building breathing in the dark. But then he looked up and saw her. A girl on the rooftop. Too close, too still, too alone. She wasn't just a shadow in the night. She was grief wrapped in silk, an heiress mourning the ones she loved most, in a world that suddenly felt unbearably empty. And in that moment, everything changed. The early morning breeze was cool and soft, brushing across the sleeping city like a whisper of forgotten dreams. From the rooftop of Sterling Heights, the most prestigious high-rise in city, the world below looked small and far away. Bella Sterling sat alone, knees hugged close to her chest, her long dark hair fluttering in the cold wind. Dressed in a simple gray hoodie and faded jeans, she looked nothing like the heiress of Sterling Holdings, the largest banking and investment empire in the country. Her eyes stared blankly at the horizon, lost in heavy thoughts. Only 3 months ago, she had walked the halls of one of the UK's most prestigious universities, her future still full of promise. Life had seemed so clear back then, no real responsibilities, no pressure. Her father, Sir Edward Sterling, had adored her, his little girl who could do no wrong. Running Sterling Holdings was never meant to be her burden. That role was reserved for her older brother, Ethan. Her future was supposed to be filled with dreams, travel, and living a quiet life while her family ruled the business world. But life didn't follow plans. The car crash that took her father, mother, and brother in a single cruel moment tore her world apart. One call, one night, and everything she loved was gone. Bella gripped her hoodie tighter against the morning chill. But the cold inside her chest couldn't be touched. She had stood by the gravesides, numb, watching the dirt fall on 3 coffins. Her father, the man who called her my little princess, the man who built Sterling Holdings with his bare hand, was gone. Her mother, her guide and comfort, gone. Her big brother, the one who was supposed to take over the company, gone too. She was left standing alone at only 23 years old, with 2 younger siblings to protect and an empire on the verge of falling apart. The board told her to step aside. Her aunts and uncles whispered in cold voices, urging her to let the experienced ones handle it. But Bella saw the greed in their eyes. She heard the hunger in their voices. They wanted to tear apart her father's legacy, sell it piece by piece, and leave her and her siblings with nothing. If she didn't fight now, she would lose everything her father built. But even the strongest warriors get tired. And tonight, Bella had slipped away from the Sterling mansion without telling anyone, needing a place to breathe, to cry without judgment. She wiped a tear from her cheek and looked down at the dark city below, feeling the weight of the world pressing against her small shoulders. Far below at the main entrance, a young security guard in a blue uniform. David Cole adjusted the sleeves of his cheap security uniform, glancing up at the towering building of Sterling Heights. It was almost sunrise, and the glass skyscraper reflected the soft orange glow like a giant mirror. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, careful to stay alert, even though his back ached from the long night shift. His job was simple: watch, guard, report. Nothing fancy. Nothing like what he had dreamed of when he graduated top of his class 2 years ago. David had a first-class degree in business administration, a mind sharp enough to solve complex corporate puzzles, and a heart that still believed hard work would pay off. But life wasn't kind to dreamers without connections. David yawned, looked up lazily, and then froze. There, at the rooftop's edge, he saw her, a girl standing too close, too fragile, too alone. His heart kicked against his ribs. No, please no, he whispered, running toward the emergency stairs. He didn't know her, he didn't care. All that mattered was reaching her before it was too late. David's boots pounded against the metal stairs, echoing up the empty shaft as he sprinted upwards. Every second counted. His lungs burned, but he didn't stop. All he could see in his mind was the girl, standing on the edge, the wind pulling at her clothes like invisible hands. He burst onto the rooftop, the heavy door slamming against the wall behind him. Bella turned sharply at the noise, startled. She took a quick step back, and her foot slipped. A small gasp left her lips as she lost balance. The world tilted, the edge growing closer. David reacted without thinking. In 2 quick strides, he grabbed her by the arm, steadying her with both hands. Her body trembled against his. "It's okay," he said softly, his voice rough with panic and relief. "You're safe now." Bella clung to him for a moment, her heart racing. She hadn't realized how close she had come to falling. She hadn't meant to scare anyone, she just needed air. But now, with this stranger's arms wrapped protectively around her, the weight she carried inside threatened to break her open. David slowly loosened his grip, making sure she could stand on her own. He stepped back, giving her space. "I'm sorry," Bella said quickly, wiping her sleeve across her tear-streaked face. I wasn't trying to do anything crazy. I just needed to think." David searched her face for a long second, seeing the truth in her eyes. Grief, exhaustion, a sadness too big for someone so young to carry alone. He nodded once, believing her. "I understand," he said simply. His voice was calm, without judgment. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft sighing of the wind. "I'm David," he finally said, offering a small, reassuring smile. "I work security here." Bella hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Bella," she whispered. No last name, no hint of who she really was. David smiled again, warmer this time. "It's nice to meet you, Bella," he said gently, as if meeting her on a sunny street and not on the edge of heartbreak. She gave a tiny broken laugh. "You too were," she said, her voice barely a breath. For a while they just stood there, watching the city lights flicker to life below. No words, no need. Two strangers, both carrying invisible battles, finding unexpected peace in a moment neither had planned. When Bella finally turned to leave, David didn't ask questions or push for answers. He simply said, "Take care of yourself, all right?" And for the first time in what felt like forever, Bella believed maybe she could. She glanced over her shoulder and smiled. A real one. Small but true. David nodded once, smiled again, and walked back toward his post. Bella stood there, heart strangely light. She had come here searching for air, and found something better. A glimpse of kindness, a reminder that somewhere, beyond the greedy boardrooms and cold headlines, good people still existed. She didn't know it yet, neither did he, but that simple moment, a stumble, a catch, a glance, was the beginning of everything. The days after the rooftop meeting blurred into each other. Bella returned to her world of endless meetings. Lawyers, board members with hungry eyes, everyone smiling politely while secretly plotting how to carve up her father's empire. Every handshake felt cold. Every conversation tasted like betrayal. She hated it. Each evening, late at night, when the mansion was quiet and she could hear her own breathing, she thought of him, David, the stranger who hadn't asked what she owned or how much she was worth. The man who had looked at her like she was a person, not a prize. She didn't even know why he stayed in her mind so stubbornly. Maybe because for a few minutes, she hadn't been an heiress. She had just been Bella. Meanwhile, David went about his shifts at Sterling Heights as usual, but he found himself glancing up at the rooftops more often, half expecting to see her again. He didn't know why it bothered him. She was just some lost girl, right? Still, he hoped she was okay. He hoped she hadn't fallen back into whatever sadness had brought her up. There that night, one evening, almost a week after that rooftop moment, fate decided to intervene. Bella, wearing simple clothes, hood up, sunglasses on, returned to Sterling Heights, not as an heiress, but as a ghost passing through familiar halls. She needed air again, but she didn't feel like climbing to the rooftop this time. Instead, she wandered to the small fountain in the courtyard, where the water trickled softly into a marble pool. She sat quietly near the fountain in the side garden, listening to the gentle splash of water, pretending, just for a while, that she was nobody. And every once in a while she would see him. David. The security man who had caught her without knowing who she was. The only person who had spoken to her like a human being and not a walking fortune. He didn't hover or pry. He simply went about his duties, checking the gates, helping tenants carry groceries, giving directions to lost delivery drivers. But Bella noticed something. Every time he saw her sitting alone, he would subtly adjust his patrol route to pass by a little more often. He never approached unless necessary, never made her feel uncomfortable, just kept an eye out. It was on a rainy afternoon that she truly understood. She had been sitting by the fountain again, lost in thought, when the clouds broke open without warning. The sky poured down in thick, cold sheets. People scrambled for shelter, Umbrellas popped open, car horns blared. Bella sat frozen for a moment, startled by the sudden storm. Then, before she could even react, a warm, heavy jacket was dropped gently over her shoulders. She looked up, blinking through the rain, and there he was. David, his own uniform soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, holding a cheap black umbrella awkwardly over her head. "You'll catch a cold," he said simply, his voice carrying over the roar of the rain. Bella's throat tightened. She wasn't used to anyone thinking about her like this, not without a camera flashing or a business card waiting. "I'm okay," she whispered, but her voice cracked slightly. David offered a faint smile, holding the umbrella steady as she stood. "Come on," he said. "There's a dry spot near the west entrance." He didn't offer his hand, didn't try to touch her, just quietly led the way, shielding her from the worst of the rain with the small umbrella, taking the wet side himself without complaint. By the time they reached the covered archway, Bella's heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. "Thank you," she said, pulling the jacket tighter around herself. David nodded, his simple kindness never changing. "Just doing my job," he said. But Bella knew better. There was no paycheck big enough to explain that kind of instinct. She watched him walk away back into the rain, jacketless, still soaked to the skin. And she realized something deep and scary. She didn't want to just be grateful. She wanted to know him, not as a stranger in a uniform, but as the man who had saved her in more ways than one. The next morning, Bella returned to Sterling Heights, not by accident this time, but on purpose. She wore the same gray hoodie, the same faded jeans, no makeup, no designer heels, no shining jewelry. She didn't want to look like an heiress. She wanted to look like herself. She sat near the fountain again, a book open on her lap that she wasn't really reading. She waited, heart nervously tapping against her ribs. And sure enough, David appeared. He was checking the west gate, jotting something down on his clipboard, his face serious but peaceful. It wasn't until he glanced toward the fountain that their eyes met. Bella smiled, small, shy, but real. David hesitated for a second, then gave a polite nod before continuing his patrol. He wasn't being rude. He was being careful. He had seen enough entitled residents to know you didn't approach anyone unless they called for you first, especially someone who looked different. Bella's heart sank a little. He was so respectful that it made it hard to get close. She needed an excuse, something natural, something small. A few minutes later, when she saw him doing his rounds again, she called out, "Excuse me?" David turned immediately, alert but calm. "Yes, miss?" "Could you help me with something?" Bella asked, lifting the book slightly. "I can't seem to connect to the building's free Wi-Fi." It was a silly lie. She knew how to connect to Wi-Fi. She could probably run the tech team herself if she wanted to. But it was the only thing she could think of. David walked over, careful not to crowd her. "Let me see," he said, crouching slightly beside her chair. He glanced at her phone, tapping gently through the settings. Bella watched him quietly. His hands were steady, his movements respectful, not a hint of arrogance, not a flicker of judgment. "There," he said after a moment, handing it back to her. "You're connected now." "Thank you," Bella said, giving him a grateful smile. He straightened, looking a little embarrassed under her gaze. "No problem," he said. "Enjoy your day." But Bella didn't want him to walk away yet. She said quickly, standing up before she could lose her nerve. "You helped me twice now. Can I at least buy you a coffee?" David blinked, surprised. "You don't have to." "I want to," Bella insisted, her voice soft but certain. For a second, he hesitated. It wasn't normal for residents to offer anything but orders. But there was something about the way she said it. Not demanding, not flirting, just honest. "All right," he said finally, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Coffee sounds good." They walked toward the small cafe across the street, side by side. No titles, no pretenses, just a girl and a boy, a stranger and a stranger, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something neither of them had dared to hope for. The small cafe across from Sterling Heights smelled of fresh bread and strong coffee. It wasn't fancy, just a few cracked leather seats and wooden tables worn smooth by time. But it was warm, alive, real. Bella and David sat by the window, 2 steaming cups between them. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, blurring the city lights into soft colors. For a few minutes, they just sipped quietly. Neither seemed to know exactly what to say. Bella kept sneaking glances at him. Up close, David looked even more different than the polished men she usually saw. His face was handsome in a rugged way. A small scar nicked just below his jaw. His hands were rough. Workers' hands, not manicured showpieces. But there was something more. Something steady. Something safe. She wanted to know him. She wanted him to know her. But not yet. Not as the Heiress plastered across magazines. Just as Bella. A girl who had lost everything and was desperately trying to find her way. "So," she said lightly, swirling her coffee, "how long have you been working at Sterling Heights?" David smiled a little. 6 months. "You like it?" He shrugged, setting down his cup. "It's a job. It pays the bills." There was no bitterness in his voice. Just honesty. Bella leaned forward a little. "What did you want to do? I mean, before this?" David paused. For a second, she thought he wouldn't answer. But then he sighed, looking out at the rainy street. "I graduated first in my class," he said quietly. "Business administration, full honors, scholarships, all of it." Bella blinked, stunned. "I thought I'd walk out of university straight into a good job," he continued. "Something where I could build a life. Help my sister through school. Maybe even start a business of my own." He smiled, but it was a tired smile. "But the world doesn't work on dreams. It works on connections. And I didn't have any." Bella's chest tightened. David looked back at her. "I'm not ashamed," he said simply. "I took the work I could find. I stand at that gate with pride. It may not be the life I imagined, but it's honest, and it's mine." Bella didn't know what to say. The men she grew up around flaunted their wealth like trophies. David wore his struggles like a badge of honor, quietly, without pity or apology. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I think that's amazing," she said softly. David chuckled under his breath. "Most people don't," he said. "Well, I'm not most people," Bella said, a tiny mischievous smile lifting her lips. David laughed then. A real laugh, low and warm. And for the first time in weeks, Bella felt something crack open inside her chest. Hope. Maybe the world hadn't completely lost its goodness after all. Maybe it was just hiding in places she never thought to look, like an attired young man in a cheap uniform, sipping coffee across from her in a broken cafe, and unknowingly stealing pieces of her heart, one simple word at a time. The rain showed no signs of stopping. The street outside the cafe shimmered with puddles, the sky a heavy blanket of gray. Bella glanced nervously at her phone. The battery was dead. She had left in such a rush that morning. No charger, no backup plan. No way to call for a car. And now, stranded, she realized how unprepared she truly was. David noticed her frown. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Bella hesitated. Part of her screamed to lie, to pretend she was fine and figure it out alone. But another part, the tired part, just wanted help. "My phone died," she admitted. "I can't call a ride, and I don't have any cash on me either." David didn't even blink. "You can wait it out here if you want," he offered easily. Or, he scratched the back of his neck, looking a little awkward. "My place is just a few blocks away. It's not much, but it's warm and dry." Bella stared at him. No hesitation. No creepy intentions. Just kindness. She should have said no. Everything in her upbringing warned her against trusting strangers. But somehow, when she looked into David's eyes, all she saw was safety. I'd appreciate that," she said quietly. David smiled, stood, and picked up both their cups to drop them into the bin before grabbing his jacket. "Come on," he said, holding the door open against the rain. They walked quickly through the wet streets, weaving between shuttered shops and puddle-filled alleys. David kept close without crowding her, occasionally holding out his arm when a reckless cyclist splashed too close. Finally, they reached a small brick building with cracked steps. David led her up 2 flights of creaky stairs to a narrow hallway and unlocked a simple wooden door. "Welcome to the palace," he joked. Bella stepped inside, and something in her chest tightened. The apartment was tiny. One small room with a worn mattress on the floor, a battered table, 2 mismatched chairs, and a gas stove in the corner. The curtains were thin, the walls were bare, but it was clean. and it was filled with something rare. Heart. David tossed his wet jacket over a chair and grabbed a clean towel from a hook. Here, he said, handing it to her. Bella dried her hair as best she could while David rummaged through the small cupboard. I have some leftover jollof rice from last night, he said, half apologetic. It's not much, but it's warm. Bella smiled, a real grateful smile. Sounds perfect, she said. Minutes later, they sat cross-legged on the mattress, sharing the steaming rice from 2 chipped plates. The food was simple, but it tasted like comfort. They talked about nothing and everything. Favorite foods, silly childhood memories, dreams that once seemed so close and now felt so far. And for the first time in what felt like years, Bella didn't feel like an heiress. She didn't feel like a girl crushed under grief and expectation. She just felt alive. As the rain tapped gently against the window, Bella leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. For tonight, at least. She had found a home not built by marble or gold, but by kindness, and it was enough. More than enough. The next morning, sunlight crept lazily through the thin curtains, painting the tiny apartment in soft gold. Bella woke slowly, the faint smell of frying eggs drifting through the air. For a moment, she forgot where she was. No marble floors, no silk sheets, no heavy silence of a giant mansion filled with ghosts. Just a thin mattress, a cracked window, and a kitchen that sang of life. She stretched, blinking away sleep, and found David humming softly by the stove, wearing an old t-shirt and track pants. He moved around the small space with practiced ease, flipping eggs in a battered pan. You're up, he said with a smile when he noticed her. Bella sat up, brushing her hair back. I didn't mean to stay over, she said, suddenly shy. David shrugged. You needed shelter, that's all that matters. He plated the eggs with some slices of bread and placed it on the table between them. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't perfect. But to Bella, it was beautiful. They ate together, talking about little things. David told her about the stray cat that sometimes visited his window. Bella made up stories about the nosy neighbor upstairs who stomped every night at 2 a.m. They laughed easily like 2 old friends, like 2 people who had known each other far longer than just a few days. And somehow, the world outside, the world that demanded titles and riches, melted away. After Bella left his house that day, she couldn't get David's story out of her head. A first-class graduate, hardworking, honest, brave, and yet tossed aside by a world too blind to see his worth. It made her blood boil. She lay awake that night in the Sterling mansion, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the men in her father's companies, some arrogant, some lazy, who sat in big offices only because they had the right last name. David deserved better. Without overthinking it, Bella reached for her phone. She dialed the number of Mr. Hargrove, her father's most trusted executive. Good evening, Miss Sterling, he answered politely. I need a favor, Bella said calmly, masking her emotions. Within minutes, she arranged it. A managerial position at one of Sterling Holdings' smaller branches, a perfect fit for David's degree and skills. Nothing suspicious, nothing flashy, just a real shot at the future he deserved. And make it look natural, she added sternly. Recruitment, standard process. He must not know I had anything to do with it. Understood, Miss Sterling, Mr. Hargrove said. When she hung up, Bella felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear. She wasn't trying to buy his affection. She just wanted to level the playing field, give him the chance the world had unfairly denied. A few days later, she got a text from David. David. Bella, you won't believe what just happened. Bella smiled, her heart flipping in her chest. Bella. What? Tell me. It took less than a minute for her phone to ring. She answered quickly. I got a job, David said, breathless with disbelief. A real one. At Sterling Logistics, one of the top companies downtown. They said they found my old application and wanted me for a management trainee program. Bella clutched the phone tighter, trying to steady her voice. David, that's amazing, she said, meaning every word. He laughed, a full, rich sound that filled her heart. I don't even know how it happened, he said. I stopped applying months ago. I thought they forgot about people like me. Tears stung Bella's eyes, but she forced herself to sound casual. Sometimes, she said softly, the world remembers the good ones. Thank you, he said suddenly. For what? Bella asked, her voice catching. For believing in me, he said simply. For seeing me when no one else did. Bella swallowed the lump in her throat. "You deserve everything good coming your way, David," she whispered. He laughed again, giddy and happy, telling her every little detail about the offer, about his mother's excitement, about the official letter. Bella congratulated him a dozen times, laughed at his jokes, and never once let it slip that she had pulled the strings behind the curtain. She wanted him to have this win, because he earned it, because he deserved it, not because of her name, not because of pity, because he was extraordinary. The sun dipped low behind the city skyline, casting a warm orange glow across the streets. David's small apartment looked a little less worn tonight. He had cleaned every surface, swept every corner, and even bought a small cake from the bakery down the street. A rare treat he could barely afford. Tonight was special. Tonight he wanted to celebrate properly, and there was only one person he wanted to share it with, Bella. When he sent her a message inviting her over, she agreed without hesitation. Now he paced the tiny living room nervously, checking the clock every few seconds. When the soft knock came at the door, he practically tripped over himself to open it. Bella stood there, wearing jeans and a simple white blouse, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She carried nothing but a bright smile, the only thing David had really hoped for. "Hey," he said, grinning wide. "Hey yourself," Bella replied, stepping inside. The apartment smelled of fresh bread and a little too much floor cleaner, but Bella didn't care. To her, it smelled like home. David led her to the tiny table where he had set up 2 chipped plates, 2 mugs, and the small cake with a crooked "congratulations" candle stuck in the middle. "I know it's not much," he said, scratching the back of his neck. Bella shook her head, her heart swelling. "It's perfect," she said honestly. They ate, laughed, and teased each other about their terrible table manners. David was buzzing with excitement, telling her about the office he'd be working at, how it had glass walls, smart desks, and even a real coffee machine. "I still can't believe they want me," he said, shaking his head. "They're lucky to have you," Bella said, meaning every word. Later, after the cake was gone and the night had grown quieter, they sat by the window, looking out at the distant lights. David turned to her, serious now. "I don't know where this road will lead," he said. "But wherever it goes, I want you there with me." Bella's heart clenched painfully. She wanted that too, more than anything. But the secret between them was growing heavier by the second. She looked at David, this wonderful man who believed she was just a simple girl like him. And she knew she couldn't lie forever. Before she could speak, David reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You're special, Bella," he whispered. "I knew at the moment I saw you on that rooftop." But Bella knew this secret couldn't last forever, and when the truth finally came out, it would either bring them closer or break everything. It happened faster than Bella could have ever prepared for. She and David were sitting by the window, sharing a battered packet of biscuits, their conversation light and meandering, the kind of peace she never used to believe she could have. Then her burner phone, the cheap, forgettable one she used to keep her real life at bay, buzzed violently against the tabletop, cutting through the calm like a warning shot. The screen flashed with a number she recognized instantly, Sterling Holdings' emergency line. Bella's stomach twisted. She grabbed the phone and stepped outside into the narrow hallway, heart pounding. "Miss Sterling," her assistant's voice crackled through, breathless. "You need to come immediately. There's been an emergency board meeting. Legal issues. Your aunt tried to overturn your authority. They're moving fast." Bella closed her eyes, leaning her head against the cold wall. This was what she had feared. While she had been hiding in borrowed peace, the wolves had been sharpening their teeth. "I'll be there," she said firmly, voice low and steady. "I'm coming now." She hung up and stood there for a long second, feeling the world shift under her feet. Then she turned back into the apartment. David was still sitting at the table, waiting patiently. "Everything okay?" he asked. Bella swallowed. "I have to go," she said. She forced a smile, bending down to pick up the little backpack she had stuffed into the corner days ago. The bag looked so out of place now. Too clean, too expensive, too polished for this tiny, worn room. David noticed. His frown deepened. "You sure you're all right?" he asked again. "I just have something important to deal with," Bella said carefully, keeping her voice light. She hesitated. Every bone in her body screamed, "Tell him now. Tell him before it's too late." But she couldn't. Not like this. Not when the ground was already falling away under her feet. "I'll call you," she promised. David nodded slowly, still looking confused but trusting her. Bella gave him one last smile, broken, tender, full of things she couldn't say, and slipped out into the night. The next day, the truth exploded. Every news channel flashed the headline, "Young heiress Bella Sterling seizes control of Sterling Holdings amid family battle." Pictures followed. Bella, in a tailored black suit, hair tied back, standing tall and unshakable in the storm of flashing cameras. Her face, her name, her legacy, all out in the open. David stood frozen in front of the small TV inside the cafe where he grabbed breakfast every morning. He stared at the screen, at Bella, not daring to blink. His Bella, the girl who had slept on his mattress, the girl who laughed about silly neighbors and stirred jollof with a wooden spoon, the girl who had looked him in the eyes and said nothing about who she really was. He felt like the air had been punched out of his lungs. A sick feeling twisted in his stomach. Why hadn't she told him? Why had she lied? The coffee in his hand grew cold. He barely noticed when someone bumped into him, cursing under their breath. All he could see, all he could hear, was the roaring silence of betrayal. David didn't go home that night. He wandered the city streets until long after the neon lights flickered out. He didn't answer Bella's calls. He didn't answer her desperate texts. He couldn't, because somewhere between the trust they had built and the lie she had carried, something inside him had cracked, and he didn't know if it could ever be whole again. Bella stood outside David's apartment, the rain falling in heavy sheets around her. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her clothes soaked through. But she didn't care. She had been knocking for almost 20 minutes now. No answer. She tried again, weaker this time. "David, please," she whispered against the door. "It's me." Silence. Her heart twisted painfully. She had called, texted, begged. Each attempt met with the same cold reply. Nothing. Inside a small diner across town, David sat hunched in a corner booth, his untouched plate growing cold. He didn't want to see her. He didn't want to hear her explanations, because deep down he was afraid that if he looked into her eyes again, all his anger would melt, and all the hurt would stay. He stirred his coffee absently, the bitter scent rising. He told himself she hadn't trusted him, that she had played with him, just like the others always did. Rich people always thought they could control everything, including people's hearts. But the truth, the one he didn't want to admit even to himself, was simpler. He missed her. He missed her laugh filling the small apartment. He missed her making a mess in the kitchen. He missed the way she sat by the window, hugging a chipped mug between her hands, smiling at nothing. And he hated himself for missing her, because missing her didn't change the fact that she had lied. Days passed. The city moved on, as it always did. But inside Bella Sterling, time stood still. She returned to the grand Sterling mansion, the halls colder than she remembered. Everything looked the same. Polished floors, priceless art, glittering chandeliers. But without her parents, without her brother, without David, it all felt hollow. Everywhere she went, she carried a silence with her, an ache she couldn't fill. She threw herself into work. Meetings, contracts, interviews. She smiled for the cameras. She spoke at press conferences. They called her the Iron Heiress now, young, brilliant, unstoppable. But every night when she pulled off her heels and dropped onto her too large bed, she replayed one memory over and over. David's eyes the last time he looked at her. Not angry, not hateful, just broken. And that hurt more than anything. One evening, Bella stood in her office, staring out at the city skyline. Her reflection looked faint in the glass, like a ghost. "You're building an empire," her Aunt Helena had told her recently. The same woman who used to be so cold was now proud of her. "You're making your father proud." Bella smiled and nodded. But deep inside, a quiet voice asked, would he still be proud if he knew how empty you feel? She missed David. Not because he made her feel rich, but because he made her feel real. She could own every building and city, sign 1,000 contracts, stand atop every magazine cover. But none of it mattered without someone to share it with, someone who loved her not for the sterling name, but for the clumsy, stubborn, silly, scared girl underneath. Someone who didn't just want her. Someone who saw her. And somehow, some way, she knew David still did. Somewhere deep down beneath the hurt. Beneath the betrayal. Beneath the walls they had both built to protect themselves. The love was still there. Waiting, bleeding, hoping. Bella sat in her car, parked across the street from Sterling Heights. The rain had dried, leaving the pavement dark and gleaming under the city lights. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, heart hammering against her ribs. What if he doesn't want to see me? What if it's too late? But another voice, quieter, stronger, whispered back, "You didn't come this far to be a coward." She had fought for her father's empire. She had fought off greedy relatives, corrupt board members, ruthless media. Now it was time to fight for something even more precious. Her heart, his heart, their future. Taking a shaky breath, Bella stepped out of the car. Inside Sterling Heights, David stood at the place where he had first met her. David. He froze. Slowly he looked up. And there she was. Bella, not the heiress from the glossy magazines, not the cold CEO from television. Just Bella, wearing jeans, sneakers, and a simple sweater. No makeup, no jewelry, just herself. His chest tightened painfully at the sight. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice low, guarded. Bella stepped closer, every nerve in her body screaming. "I came to say everything I should have said a long time ago," she said, voice shaking. David said nothing, his eyes unreadable. "I lied," Bella continued, her throat tightening. "I didn't tell you who I was because I was scared. Scared you'd treat me differently. Scared I'd lose the only real thing I'd ever had." David's hands curled into fists against the desk. "You should have trusted me," he said quietly. "I know," Bella whispered, blinking back tears. "I was selfish. I thought I was protecting something fragile, but I was wrong." She stepped closer, her voice breaking open. "You didn't fall for Bella Sterling. You fell for me, the clumsy girl who can't cook, who sings off key, who's terrified of pigeons. The girl who loved sharing cheap coffee and burnt rice and rainy afternoons with you." David's face stayed still, but his eyes flickered. "I don't care about the money," Bella said. "I don't care about the name. I would give it all up. The company, the houses, everything. If it meant I could have one more night in that tiny apartment, eating burnt jollof with you." Bella took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm not asking you to forgive me now," she said. "I'm not asking you to forget what I did." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I'm just asking for a chance to prove it wasn't a lie. That what we had was real. That I love you, David. With everything I am. With everything I have." She stood there, trembling but unbroken, her heart laid bare. Waiting, hoping, praying. David stared at her for a long, long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. So softly, it broke something inside her. "You were real," he said, voice rough. "You still are." And just like that, the dam broke. Bella threw herself into his arms, sobbing against his chest. David held her tightly, breathing her in, feeling the broken pieces of his heart start knitting themselves back together. Not because she was perfect. Not because she was rich. But because she was his. Broken, flawed, honest, real, and he loved her. God, he loved her. It had been a month since that night in the Sterling Heights lobby. A month of slow healing. A month of honest conversations. A month of rebuilding something stronger than before. There were no more lies between them now. Bella had shown David her world. The sprawling boardrooms, the towering skyscrapers, the suffocating expectations. And David had shown Bella the simple joys of quiet mornings, the stubborn dignity of building a life brick by brick, the fierce pride of earning every step forward. They were different. Wildly, impossibly different, but somehow they fit. Not because their worlds matched, but because their hearts did. David had refused every expensive gift Bella tried to give him at first. New cars, designer suits, fancy watches. He didn't want to be bought. He wanted to stand beside her on his own 2 feet, not in her shadow, not as a kept man, but as an equal. So Bella offered him something else instead. Not a gift, not a prize, but a partnership, a future, a life built side by side. She created a new division within Sterling Holdings, a foundation for supporting young talents from underprivileged backgrounds. David became the head of it, not because she owed him, not because he needed saving, but because he was perfect for it. Because he understood better than anyone what it meant to fight for a future. He built the Golden Rise Initiative from scratch, recruiting dreamers like himself who had been overlooked, forgotten, cast aside. Together, they gave hope to hundreds of young people who had once been told they weren't enough. David wasn't just surviving anymore. He was leading, changing lives, changing futures. And Bella? She smiled again. She laughed again. She lived again. Not because she had saved her father's empire, but because she had built her own home, a home made of love, trust, and second chances. One soft evening, under a sky splashed with stars, David knelt before Bella in the garden behind Sterling Mansion, the same one that once felt too cold, too empty. Now it was full of light and laughter. Bella gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, tears instantly brimming in her eyes. David held out a simple silver ring, no massive diamonds, no flash. Just a promise. I don't have an empire, he said softly. I don't have a fortune. All I have is my heart, and it's yours, if you'll have it. Bella fell to her knees, laughing through her tears. You already had it, she whispered, throwing her arms around him. They kissed under the wide open sky. No walls between them. No secrets. No fear. Just love. Pure. Real. Unbreakable. And together, Bella and David walked into a future not built by money or legacy or expectation, but by the simple, stubborn, breathtaking magic of choosing each other every single day, forever. The end. If this story touched you, feel free to hit the like button and subscribe for more heartfelt tales.